Chapter 13. Her Past Surfaces. There is a specific kind of intimacy in sharing a closet with a man like Alexander Blackwood. His side was a mathematical progression of charcoal, navy, and black. Perfectly pressed shirts, organized by fabric weight, shoes polished to a mirror finish, ties rolled like silk snails in their velvet compartments. My side, by contrast, was a splash of emerald, midnight blue, and cream. I stood there in my robe, holding a stack of my sweaters, staring at the space he had cleared for me. He hadn't just given me a shelf, he had given me half of his sanctuary. Last night, I had seen the words, "You are free, Maya." Today, I was moving in. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent weeks fighting for the exit, only to realize that the only place I wanted to be was right here, in the heart of the storm. "You're overthinking again," a low voice rumbled from the doorway. I turned. Alexander was leaning against the frame, a cup of coffee in his hand. He was wearing his casual-look dark trousers and a white dress shirt with the sleeves already rolled up. His hair was still slightly damp from the shower. "I'm just wondering where the catch is," I admitted, placing my sweaters on the shelf. "You gave me my freedom, Alexander. You crossed out the clause. Why am I still here?" He set his coffee down on a dresser and walked toward me. The walk-in closet felt suddenly very small. He stopped behind me, his hands sliding around my waist, pulling me back against his chest. His skin was warm, his scent, that intoxicating sandalwood, filling my lungs. "You're here because you want to be," he whispered into my hair. That was the whole point of crossing it out. A bird in a cage isn't a partner. I don't want a captive, Maya, I want you. I leaned my head back against his shoulder, closing my eyes. And what happens when the 6 months are up? When the Horizon Project is launched and the world knows everything we've done? "Then we write a new contract," he murmured, his lips grazing my neck. "One without an expiration date." My heart did a slow, heavy roll in my chest. He wasn't talking about business anymore. He was talking about a life. It was a terrifying thought. A billionaire like Alexander Blackwood, a man who moved companies like chess pieces, actually wanting a future with the daughter of a man he'd ruined. "We have to go to the office," I said, trying to regain my composure. Marcus called. The press is outside the tower. The gala scandal is the lead story on every tabloid. "Let them talk," Alexander said, though his grip on my waist tightened. "They love a mystery, and right now, you're the biggest mystery in New York." "I'm not a mystery. I'm a person with a job to do." "You're both." He kissed the spot just below my ear, a lingering, possessive touch. "Now get dressed. We have a war to win today." Alexander POV. The lobby of Blackwood Tower was a gauntlet. Flashbulbs popped like miniature explosions, the light reflecting off the glass and steel. Security held the line, but the shouts of the reporters echoed through the cavernous space. "Mr. Blackwood, was the confrontation with Julian Vane personal or professional?" "Miss Sterling, are you the reason for the sudden shift in Blackwood's strategy?" "Alexander, is there a wedding in the future?" I didn't acknowledge them. I kept my hand firmly on the small of Maya's back, guiding her toward the private elevator. I felt her tension, the way her shoulders stayed square even as she leaned slightly into me. She was handling it better than most CEOs would. Once the elevator doors closed, the silence returned, blessed and heavy. "A wedding?" Maya asked, a faint trace of a smile on her lips. "They're getting ahead of themselves." "The press has a limited imagination," I said, checking my watch. "They see a man and a woman together, they assume it's a romance. They can't fathom a partnership that's both intellectual and visceral." Visceral, is that what we are? Among other things. The doors opened onto the 90th floor. Marcus was waiting, his face a mask of controlled chaos. He followed us into my office, his tablet chirping with a constant stream of notifications. "The board is in a panic, sir," Marcus began. "Henderson is calling for an emergency session. He thinks your erratic behavior at the gala is a sign of a leadership crisis." "Henderson is a vulture waiting for a carcass that isn't coming," I snapped, sitting behind my desk. "Tell him the erratic behavior was a calculated move to destabilize Vane's confidence before the quarterly merger talks. It worked. Vane's stock dropped 3 points this morning." "And Miss Sterling?" Marcus asked, glancing at Maya. "Miss Sterling is the senior advisor. Her role is unchanged. In fact, I want her to lead the press briefing this afternoon. If they see her brilliance, they'll stop looking at her dress." Maya looked at me, her eyes wide. "You want me to talk to them now?" "I want you to show them who owns the room, Maya. You proved it to the board. Now prove it to the world." She nodded, a look of grim determination crossing her face. "Fine, I'll prepare the statement." She walked toward her office, but as she reached the door, she stopped. A man was standing there, talking to the receptionist. He was young, perhaps in his late 20s, wearing a suit that was expensive but lacked the refinement of the Blackwood style. I saw Maya's face. The blood drained from her cheeks so quickly she looked like she might faint. Her hand went to the doorframe to steady herself. "Maya." I stood up, my instincts screaming. The man turned around. He had a handsome, easy smile, the kind that looked like it had been practiced in a mirror. When he saw Maya, his eyes lit up with a terrifying familiarity. "Maya," the man said, his voice a smooth, oily baritone. "It's been a long time, baby." Maya POV. The world stopped. The air in the executive lobby turned to ice. Caleb Thorne. He was the ghost I had buried years ago. He was the man my father had trusted more than anyone, the brilliant young protege who had sat at our dinner table, who had promised to help my father change the world. And then, when the sharks began to circle, he was the one who had opened the gates. He had sold our proprietary research to a shell company. He had been the leak that allowed the hostile part of the takeover to happen. He was the reason my father had a stroke. "What are you doing here, Caleb?" I whispered, my voice shaking so hard I could barely get the words out. "I heard you were back in the game," Caleb said, stepping toward me. He ignored the way Alexander was rounding his desk, his expression turning into something lethal. "I saw the photos from the gala. You look good, Maya." "A little more Upper East Side than I remember, but still the same girl." "Get out," I said. "Now, is that any way to treat an old friend or an old fiancé?" I felt the shockwave of his words ripple through the room. Marcus froze. Alexander stopped in his tracks, his eyes narrowing until they were like shards of flint. "Fiancé." Alexander's voice was a low, dangerous rumble. "We never made it to the altar," I said, finally finding my voice. I turned to Alexander, my eyes pleading with him to understand. "It was years ago, before everything happened. He's the one who betrayed my father, Alexander. He's the reason Sterling IP was vulnerable in the first place." Alexander looked at Caleb. If looks could kill, the man would have been a pile of ash on the carpet. "Mr. Thorne," Alexander said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "I believe you were told that this floor is for authorized personnel only." "I have authorization," Caleb said, pulling a card from his pocket. "I'm the new lead consultant for Vane Global. Julian Vane sent me to discuss the joint venture on the Horizon encryption. Since I'm the only one who knows the original source code as well as Maya does, he thought I'd be a natural fit for the team. He was smiling. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was Julian Vane's revenge. Vane had been humiliated at the gala, and now he was sending Maya's past back to haunt her, to plant a seed of doubt in Alexander's mind. "I don't care if you're the Pope," Alexander said, stepping into Caleb's personal space. "You are in my building, talking to my senior advisor. And you have exactly 10 seconds to leave before security removes you with extreme prejudice." "I'm just here for the work, Alexander," Caleb said, his eyes flicking to me. "But Maya knows I'm good at more than just coding. Don't you, Maya, remember those late nights in the lab before your dad got sick?" The implication was disgusting. It was a lie our relationship had been a mistake of youth, a brief engagement that ended the moment I realized he was stealing from us. But in front of Alexander, in this high-tension environment, the words felt like poison. 10, Alexander said. "See you around, Maya," Caleb said, winking at me. "I'm sure we'll have plenty to catch up on during the merger meetings." He turned and walked toward the elevator, his whistle echoing in the silence. Alexander POV. I wanted to kill him. I didn't want to sue him. I didn't want to ruin him. I wanted to put my hands around his throat and feel the life leave his body for the way he had looked at her, for the way he had said baby. I turned to Maya. She was still standing by the door, her eyes fixed on the empty space where Caleb had been. She looked shattered. The strength I had seen in the closet this morning was gone, replaced by a raw, naked vulnerability. "Maya," I said, my voice softer now. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear, Alexander, I haven't seen him in 3 years. I didn't even know he was in New York." "I know." I walked over to her and took her hands. They were ice cold. I pulled her into my office and shut the door, shutting out Marcus and the rest of the world. I led her to the sofa, the same sofa where I had almost taken her a few nights ago, and sat her down. I knelt in front of her, my hands on her knees. "Tell me," I commanded. "There's nothing to tell. He was my father's student. We were engaged for 6 months. I thought he loved me. I thought he loved the science. But he was just waiting for the right moment to sell us out. When I found the offshore accounts, I broke it off. A week later, my father had the stroke." She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "He's the past I tried to run away from, Alexander, and now Vane has him. He's going to use him to get to the code. He's going to use him to get to me." I felt a cold, hard resolve settle in my chest. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was a direct attack on what was mine. Julian Vane had made a fatal error. He thought he could use Maya's past to weaken me. He didn't realize that by threatening her, he had given me a reason to destroy him completely. "He won't touch you," I said, my voice vibrating with power. "He won't touch the code. And if he ever speaks your name again, I will ensure he never works in this industry, or any other, for the rest of his life. He knows the algorithm, Alexander. He knows the backdoors my father built. Then we change the backdoors, we rewrite the logic." I stood up and pulled her to her feet, bringing her flush against me. "You and I tonight. We stay in the lab and we lock him out. Not just of the system, but of your life." Maya looked up at me, a flicker of hope returning to her eyes. You're not angry about the engagement." "Angry?" I let out a short, dry laugh. "I'm furious, but not at you. I'm furious that a man like that ever had the privilege of holding your hand. I'm furious that he made you feel like you had to hide. But most of all, I'm furious that he thinks he can walk into my world and take anything from me." I kissed her then, a hard, fierce kiss that was meant to burn the memory of Caleb thorn from her skin. I wanted her to feel my power, my protection, my absolute claim. "You're a Blackwood now, Maya," I whispered against her lips. "Maybe not by name yet, but by everything else. And nobody touches what belongs to a Blackwood." Maya POV. The dangerous silence was gone, replaced by a dangerous purpose. We spent the afternoon in a whirlwind of activity. Alexander directed the legal team to file an immediate injunction against Vane Global, citing a conflict of interest and intellectual property theft by Caleb Thorne. Marcus was tasked with digging up every piece of dirt on Caleb's history, every failed project, every questionable deal. By 8:00 p.m., the office was empty again. The city lights were glowing outside, but inside the private lab on the 91st floor, the air was humming with the sound of high-powered servers. Alexander had stripped off his blazer and tie. He was sitting at the main console, his fingers flying across the holographic keyboard. I was beside him, my own screen filled with the core logic of the mapping algorithm. "We need to relayer the neural pathways," I said, pointing to a section of the code. "Caleb knows the 2018 sequence. If we shift to a 2024 recursive model, his keys won't work." "It'll take all night," Alexander noted, not looking up. "I've spent a lot of nights in this lab, Alexander. I can handle it." "Not alone." He paused, his hand coming to rest over mine on the desk. He looked at me, the blue light of the monitors reflecting in his gray eyes. "We do this together, everything, from now on." The work was grueling. It was a dance of logic and mathematics, a battle against a ghost who knew our moves before we made them. But as the hours ticked by, I felt a strange sense of peace. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the mistake or the caged bird. I was the architect of my own defense, standing side by side with a man who was willing to move mountains to keep me safe. Around 2:00 a.m., the system finally chirped, a long, high-pitched sound of success. New security protocol, active. Old keys, revoked. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling a breath I felt like I'd been holding since Caleb walked into the lobby. "He's out," I whispered. "He's out," Alexander agreed. He turned his chair toward mine, his eyes dark with exhaustion and something much more intense. The lab was quiet, the only sound the cooling fans of the servers. The tension that had been building all day, the fear of the past, the heat of the defense, finally reached its breaking point. Alexander reached out and pulled me into his lap. I didn't resist. I wrapped my arms around his neck, burying my face in his shoulder. The smell of him was the only thing that felt real. "He's gone, Maya," Alexander murmured, his hand stroking my hair. "He can't hurt you. He can't touch the sterling legacy. It's safe." "Why are you doing this?" I asked, looking up at him. "It's so much work, so much risk. You could have just fired me when he showed up. It would have been easier." "Easier?" Alexander gripped my waist, his eyes boring into mine. "I don't do easy, I do what's mine. And you, Maya Sterling, are the only thing in this world I'm not willing to trade." He kissed me then, and this time there was no anger. It was slow, deep, and filled with a tenderness that made my heart ache. In the sterile, high-tech glow of the lab, he was showing me the truth he had tried so hard to hide. He didn't just want my code. He didn't just want my body. He wanted me. "Let's go home," he whispered against my lips. "I am home," I replied. Alexander POV. We walked back to the penthouse in the pre-dawn light. The city was waking up, the first hints of pink and gold hitting the tops of the skyscrapers. I looked at Maya. She was exhausted, her eyes heavy, but she looked stronger than she had in weeks. The ghost of Caleb Thorne had been exorcised, but I knew the war wasn't over. Julian Vane wouldn't stop with one consultant. The media would still be looking for a story. The board would still be looking for a weakness. I walked over to the desk and picked up the phone. Marcus, I want a full audit of Vane Global's recent acquisitions. If they want to use the past against us, we'll use the future against them. I want to buy their primary lender by noon. Understood, sir. And the press briefing. Cancel it. We don't need to explain ourselves to the world. We're going to let the results speak for us. I hung up and looked at Maya. She was standing by the window, watching the sun rise. She looked like a part of the skyline, beautiful, enduring, and mine. My control had slipped, yes. My rules had been broken. My past had collided with hers in a way I never expected. But as I walked toward her, wrapping my arms around her from behind, I realized that I had never been more in control of my life. Because for the first time, I knew exactly what I was fighting for. Get some sleep, Maya, I whispered. Tomorrow, we finish this. Tomorrow, she agreed, leaning back into me. The past had surfaced, but it hadn't drowned us. It had only taught us how to swim in the deep water together. And in Alexander Blackwood's world, that was the only way to survive. Next chapter, Chapter 14, The Almost Kiss.